that we flipped over crowdsourcing.
Thank you very much, Ron. And it's good to see my friends from the English department and from Nash Division and a Maverick leader as well here today. Last spring, I did a technology-oriented presentation on mobile learning, and I think most of you were at that one. And this is in some ways a follow-up on that, and in other ways it's something kind of new. One of the things that Ron mentioned, of course, is that I like to know what's coming up. That's always been an interest to me for all of my career. So today, what I brought are, and I'd like those to be circulated, those Wired magazines. You may have seen that magazine before. It happens to have some good education articles in it from time to time, as well as just knowing what's happening in the world of technology in many different disciplines. If you've been in education for 40 years, as I have, you know that many different fields inform our practice. And what we find is that we're doing some of the things that people in other disciplines are doing as well. We might even call it the same name. I'm going to say today that sometimes we've been doing things that I'm going to be talking about, like crowdsourcing, and we haven't used that name. But I did adopt that name when I applied for a mini grant, and guess what? I got it! So I'm thinking that knowing what the words are and using them can help us to accomplish the goals that we have in mind in terms of learning about new things. Now, I'm choosing to sit and work from my iPad simply because when I'm in the classroom and I'm at the computer station, I don't like it a whole lot. You know, even though I can walk around with a remote control, I really find that I'm more comfortable if I'm closer to the technology and don't have to run around trying to catch it, so to speak. So that's what I'm going to do today. Now, today I chose to put this on put this presentation on not a PowerPoint presenter, but simply a thing called Explain Everything, and it's an app. All of the slides but one, I think, came across just fine, but you'll notice they're not very complicated. So for those of you who were here last semester, we talked about number one on my list of top 10 words we need to know these days, and that's mobile learning, which is any activity that allows individuals to be more productive when consuming, interacting with, or creating information, mediated through a compact digital portable device like Brianna's telephone, that the individual carries on a regular basis, has reliable connectivity, and fits into a pocket or a purse. The first time I heard about mobile learning was probably about 5 years ago, and at that time, it was a new thing. You know, I came back and I told Ron, you know what, Ron? We're going to be teaching classes off of our telephones pretty soon. Of course, Ron didn't believe me, and we aren't really teaching from our phones, but I do know faculty who interact with their students through Angel. If they have the kind of phone that works well with Angel, they actually do interact with them on their telephones. But as I've been thinking about today, I thought about these statements. It will kill us all. New technology. It will steal my daughter. I'll never use it. And, you know, there are plenty of folks who will say I never use it about technology. But more people nowadays are saying to me, what are you going on about, Vivian? Flipped classrooms and crowdsourcing. So there is a fair amount of curiosity, so it's appropriate, I think, for us to go right ahead and talk about it. I asked you to BYOD, and when I said that, I wasn't just talking about the lemonade I brought today, which, you know, Ron has the other juices we could enjoy. So I asked my students today, had they ever heard of bring your own device? And they hadn't actually. There are a number of universities, several, which have already changed from a computer-based or lab-based setting to bring your own device. They're not providing the laptops for students. They're not. They're moving with the technology that the students already possess. Now, is that going to replace what we have? We have to look at the bigger picture and the issues of the digital divide and the fact that not everybody's going to have laptops or telephones. More people will have telephones than have laptops, though. So that's going to make a difference in what we're doing. This, about 2 days ago, Marissa Mayer, who is the Google executive who was stolen away by Yahoo to lead them, had a baby. And you may have heard the news when she got a little bit of flack for being introduced to the world as the next CEO and then also announcing she was going to have a baby. And, you know, there were some who gasped and said, well, how can she lead Yahoo? And she answered them, I think, pretty effectively. But here she is, and she's, right after she has her baby, she's emailing a group of her friends and colleagues for suggestions of the baby's name. And how digital can you get is the comment that came up with that. Well, what she's doing is crowdsourcing, essentially. So we're actually concerned today with the idea of the crowdsourcing phenomenon. As it's being popularized in business and in other areas of life. But also I wanted to take us back to the word crowd and think about, might it refer metaphorically to something we're less comfortable with, perhaps. And what came to mind was this quotation from Dante. I who looked again beheld a banner, which whirling round ran on so rapidly that of all pause it seemed to me indignant. And after it there came so long a train of people that I ne'er would have believed that ever death so many had undone. So this is a picture in Dante's Inferno in Canto 3. He's seeing these souls who are running behind a blank banner. The blank banner shows they don't have a particular belief. They're just following. So there's a danger of that meaning of the crowd. In ancient times, the word crowd referred to more often the majority. So in a democratic assembly, kind of the best of the crowd. But in English in particular, the word crowd has come to mean more like the mob, the masses, the commoners. So there are positive and there are negative connotations to the word crowd. And I think if you think about how we might look at crowdsourcing as what it is, an appeal, you can think about how that relates to our using it metaphorically. Is Wikipedia good or bad? What do you think?
Awesome. It's not even one or the other.
Awesome what, Mike?
It's not good or bad, it's awesome.
It's awesome. Okay. Have you ever had students say, well, my teacher said I never can use Wikipedia? Yeah. What's Wikipedia do?
Crowdsource.
Yeah. How does it crowdsource, Mike?
Well, actually, I wanted to share with you on NPR this morning, there was a whole brief discussion that an expert regarding, I wrote it down, a riot, Hayfield riots, I believe it was?
Haymarket.
Haymarket, yeah, thank you. See, I didn't know about
I
that.
listened to it.
Yeah, so I've contributed to Wikipedia. I read a whole book, that sounds ridiculous in this company, but I read a book on Wikipedia this summer about its history, inception, and philosophy. It's a psychology experiment, and I think it's worked. They thought it would, bring out the lowest common denominator in the dregs, but it really is about, like a college and or a university, it's passionate people who care very much about the material that's on the site. Anybody can contribute, but they can't contribute anything. I
That's
tell
a
my
good way to
students,
put it.
I just made that up. I tell my students it's a great place to start, but a bad place to start. And I can't see why anyone would argue with that, but plenty of people do, because it kind of destroys our it crowdsources us.
Well, and that's it. If the crowdsourced group, basically, a crowdsourcing is an appeal to a group with a common purpose. So if that common purpose is to advance knowledge in your discipline, naturally, that's an admirable goal and you want to contribute to it. The contribution is usually motivated by enjoyment, curiosity, a wish to help others, because rarely in a crowdsourced situation does anyone get anything material. Although there are some business models that will, give somebody something like an opportunity to have a gift card or something like that. Now, what I'm seeing that I'm most intrigued about with regard to crowdsourcing is how it's affecting publishing and how it might affect professional development. It's already starting. We have a lot on the web on this right-hand side where you can see that there are places where you can put a whole bunch of stuff, right? You as an individual can go to YouTube, have your own account, put all of, your crazy videos about whatever you want to say, and it can be really substantive or it can be useless, it can be just anything. But nothing really holds it together. There isn't anybody in the background saying, this is canon and here's why. But there are efforts to create a sort of like a Wikipedia responsibility to figure out what should be on there and what shouldn't be. Sometimes it's an individual, more often it's a group of people. So anyway, all of these kinds of things which you may use, individuals use, or put things up there, but that's not quite the same thing as crowdsourcing. Even though it's available to the crowd, okay, individuals have put it there.
So is it kind of like a meeting, like through technology pretty much? Like you ask a question to a group of people and you get feedback, and based off that feedback?
No, that's a good way to put it. And what I'm going to do is play you this little video that I have.
No.
Try one more time.
Complex. It looks kind of interesting. Pretty engaging. We didn't look at that. Okay. I don't know. Let me think about it. Did your Wi-Fi drop?
In the past, when a project was too big for one person, we could either hire an expensive team or ask people around us for favors. Today, we have a new option. We can ask a crowd of motivated strangers from around the world for help. Neville was faced with a challenge. He was working on the world's most difficult crossword puzzle and had a deadline 1 month away. This puzzle was meant for a team, but even with the help of his wife and brother, he'd never finish on time, and he couldn't afford to hire help. But he had an idea. He lived in a neighborhood with lots of smart people. His idea was to ask a large crowd of neighbors for a slice of their time in solving the puzzle. This way, a crowd of people together could achieve the goal. As it turned out, his neighbors, who he didn't know previously, loved crossword puzzles and were motivated to help. To make it easy, he put the puzzle in the center of the neighborhood so neighbors could contribute at any time. They're now like solving a couple of clues just before bed. Natalie solved one a day just after work. Within a couple of weeks, it all came together. 20 different neighbors became a crowd of people who each worked on the project independently. They each found a slice of time they could devote when they wanted. Some were motivated by the challenge, others just loved to contribute. Neville had to learn to keep up with and manage the crowd's progress. But in the end, he was able to solve the puzzle ahead of schedule and have time to throw a big party to celebrate. Yay! While crossword puzzles may not.
So they go on and give us their pitch for the service they provide, which is you send them your problem and they crowdsource it for you, crowdsource solutions for you. Now, what do we do in the classroom that's similar to this kind of thing? What did we do in the classroom that asks for a group of people with a common purpose?
Peer review.
Peer review. If you've got a small group of people, sure. Anything else?
That's a group project.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I didn't want to tell everybody you're going to come find another word for group projects, but in reality, that's what it can be. Have you ever had a group project turn out badly, though?
Yes.
Sure. What makes the difference?
Motivate.
The amount of people, the individuals will do. Okay, what else will make a difference?
The division of labor, proper division of labor.
The understanding of the labor, right? So sometimes if we don't clearly define what our goal is with group work, it doesn't end up very well. And the same could be said for any kind of a crowdsourcing endeavor. I'm not sure if the CEO of Yahoo is going to get what she wants by saying, give me some names. Might have been helpful if she gave people some parameters, but I think it's really just kind of a fun thing, yeah.
Just wanted to share, again, listen to that snippet this morning. Our daughter's name is Sophie. We thought we were being unique.
Oh,
And
really?
it's the #1 name for last year. And so it goes along with Wikipedia, and they quoted Sir Francis Galton where he talked about trying to find the weight of an ox at a fair. And it just discussed statistics that if you ask one person, they might get it. If they were an expert, they would get it. But ask 100 non-experts, right? And the average is going to guess the weight of the ox. And so what she's doing essentially is asking the
What's
commoners
most
what's
popular.
most popular, and she'll probably like it given the fact that, you know, we're a product of our environment. Except that she's pretty famous, and famous people like to pick Garrison or Apple or, you know, something very jet. You know, again, so experts, we're the experts. We might know something the commoners don't, but Wikipedia is about what the common person should know about a common body of knowledge.
Yes.
So she'll probably, we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So it's crowdsourced intelligence. You know, what's the common denominator in many respects? It is a kind of outsourcing, is it not? It's saying, I'm giving you the responsibility.
It's how Mark Zuckerberg passed his art history.
Oh, tell us about
Did you
that.
see the movie?
No.
Well, he never went, so the movie tells us, he never went to class, but he put the 4 paintings online and asked people to discuss.
But is that true? Because there were some parts of the movie that he, is it, you know, they.
Well, I'm not,
But
He's not
the
sure.
The mythology of
I'm
Zuckerberg.
just saying, yeah, I'm not.
It could happen.
According to the movie,
Yeah,
it's
for
how.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the difference between crowdsourcing and surveying? Taking a survey.
I included let's see, I did, maybe I didn't. I thought I included focus group on there. I think that a focus group is a type of crowdsourcing. Although it's not like the example that we got where the individuals were giving a slice of their time asynchronously. Sometimes in a focus group, all the people are in the room. My brother is a vice president for a marketing company, and all of their focus groups are now online, and their panels, you know, engage separately, not all at the same time. But the focus group then gives the people who are interested in a result some things to think about. So they're not really looking for the solution that they've defined, okay? This is an example. Martina and I have been to a couple of meetings with these publishers. I don't know if you took a look at it. You might be familiar with these books. They're by Four Letter Press, which is a an idea of Cengage, and they claim at least to have done extensive focus groups on these and to have been guided by those focus groups in creating the textbook. Looks pretty good. Looks like something students would enjoy. On occasion, we found an error or something that we didn't like as well as something else. But all in all, it's pretty canonical, you know. That's a result of a focus group, really. What else can you think of that makes you think about crowdsourcing? Hey, Larry, and you'd like to know more?
Is it like Merlot or
Well, that kind of brings me to this, a collection of teaching materials on a common platform. I think that is a type of crowdsourcing, but I have a problem with that personally, because how am I going to have the time to go through all of that? It's just like telling me go to the web, because there's still so much stuff. And what I'm excited about is seeing some more curated kinds of examples. So is that the next word? Yeah, content curation. So I like to think about a teaching materials file cabinet. Probably 20 years ago, if I had said to one of my peers at my previous job, you know, I'm going to be moving to the college, and I know I'm not going to be using some of these things in my file cabinet. Would you like to have them? Yeah, sure. You know, most teachers are hungry for sharing materials. And even now, we have had cases where people have shared materials on CDs. You know, in our division, we use the flash drives. Lana has created a great resource for developmental teachers on Angel. So we have lots of places where people are providing shared materials. And Larry and I are being asked to create or to follow up with last year's faculty fellows creating some best practices videos. So there's all this opportunity for sharing going on. So I put this screen from Dropbox up there because, you know, how do we move from it's all in a file cabinet or it's all in a resource to where it's effectively shared? We still need a curator. We still need either a panel or a person to be able to put some order to it. And a brand new company has thought about that. And their name is Learnist. And their board actually looks very much like Pinterest. This is kind of smooshed in because it's an iPad. If you were looking at this on a big screen, it would have many rows. So it looks familiar, and we're going to go to education for a moment. Accessing the flipped classroom in the bottom left-hand corner. So when we choose that, we're going to find that there's more stuff in there. What she's essentially done is pinned it or clipped it there. So now the question becomes, all right, we have this opportunity to pull things from so many places, and how can we share it? And what some people are now writing about is these two questions. What's the best way to integrate social media platforms rather than just sharing boards? And that's what I'm curious about. How will crowdsourcing help us as instructors? When we do groups, okay, we know how to do that. We collect materials, okay, but how can we do that better in some way? What's the possibility really for more elaborate and more collaborative sharing over those kinds of things? Crowdfunding's next. So I have to tell you that's pretty much the sum up of what I know about crowdsourcing so far. when Ron asked me to write about or to talk about crowdsourcing, I said, sure, I'll do it. This was, of course, last semester. And I had applied for my grant, and I was going to crowdsource a textbook for world literature. So, but what I was going to do is have students find all the different translations that were available, and then they would decide which is the most coherent or most comprehensible for them to understand, and so on. Well, that class got canceled. So I'm going to do it with a different class next semester. And I think there's still some promise in that approach. I don't know if any of you in this room do, but I've known teachers who crowdsource their syllabi or crowdsource the collection of readings they're going to do because they don't have a textbook and they have students make those decisions. That's another way to crowdsource as well. Have you come across any other examples that you'd like to mention?
I think David Kimmy uses Google Docs. I think it's worth mentioning. I think maybe it might be a crossover between your YouTube example and the crowdsourcing example because it's a closed network.
But that's all him.
Well, no, I mean, he puts a document out there and lets the students devour it. I can't remember the term they use for Wikipedia. It wasn't crowdsourcing, but I think they call it piranha sourcing. Like you put a piece of meat out there and it could be gross, but you let people chip away at it and eat away at it and it becomes something else.
Okay.
So I've been intrigued with the Google Doc idea for years. About creating a course that the students build based on what works best for them. Not just a syllabus or book, but...
Yeah. Well, I think that the whole idea behind, I'm going to skip crowdfunding for just a minute and go over to flipped classroom because it's relevant to what we're talking about, and that is the flipped classroom rather movement has attained a lot of impetus, I guess you could say, a lot of, it's gotten faster, it's moving faster, it's gotten into the mainstream. There's even a book out now sponsored by the Association for Curriculum Development and the International Society for Technology Education. I think I said that wrong, but anyway, it's co-sponsored by those organizations. Now, I sent out there a flipped classroom example of a chemistry class and of an AP biology history class. Both of those, I think, are units from a teacher-made material website where the teachers upload the stuff that they've made and you pay them for it. So that's another thing we'll talk about, the maker revolution. But the flipped classroom involves the student more than a traditional classroom, but if you were here in 1995, we were asked to limit our use of lecture and to engage our students in other activities, which really wasn't a problem because we knew how to do that. As long as we understood that it wasn't prescriptive, a certain kind of engagement. And students learn better when they're involved in making decisions and perhaps teaching themselves and others. And I think at the core, that's what the flipped classroom is. But what is happening is a lot of people are misunderstanding it as simply a collection of videos, like Khan Academy, for instance. So, how many of you have been to Khan Academy? Okay. This is what it looks like as an app. You just go there, and these are the subjects that it includes. Humanities is the smallest portion, but if you wanted to go to a math topic and you wanted to learn about probability, there might be several hundred videos that you could watch that would allow you to hopefully understand a concept being presented. Now, the Khan Academy has gone beyond just having the videos and is now starting to have activities in there, but it wasn't originally. So this started about 2006, 2008, something like that. Was popularized when it hit the news with Bill Gates and with the TEDx video that Mr. Khan produced or was the subject of. Yet another, in my view, way to just have a bunch of stuff, but what are we going to do with it? So it's still, don't be concerned about crowdsourcing and flipped classrooms, because ultimately the instructor is the one who makes it work, makes the conductor of the orchestra, so to speak. I do think it's interesting, though, that even the book that's been written about it has as its motto, reach every student in every way and on every day, or something like that. And that's kind of a hard thing to do, but that's the goal. The goal is to provide other opportunities for students to learn. Now, to get a little more radical, let's consider something I didn't tell Ron I was going to talk about today. Uncollege. There are disruptors who value disruption so much that they talk about each other as disruptive innovators, and there's even a theory about disruptive innovation. So, okay, well, basically it's saying that it's broken, education is broken, so we're going to disrupt things. We're going to turn things upside down and change the way it is so that then we can fix it. Oftentimes that includes technology. Oftentimes today in 2012, it's for profit. So what I think you're going to be seeing in the next month, perhaps, year, 2 years, are more of these online institutions like Udemy. So you're going to see MOOCs.
That's unfortunate.
Massive open online courses. So a MOOC is a class that's taught online large numbers of students with minimal involvement by professors. Typically, students watch short video lectures and complete assignments that are graded by machines or by TAs. So a lone professor can support hundreds of thousands of students, as did Sebastian Thrun, however you say his name, with 160,000 students from 190 countries. He thought that was great because he could reach so many more students than he could in a classroom at Stanford. So he's taken a leave of absence from Stanford and is now engaged in creating and promoting Coursera, which is a for-profit organization that has been linked to universities like Princeton and University of Virginia. Now, when you see the Chronicle for Higher Education article about what is a MOOC, one of the things I noticed in a sidebar was that oftentimes faculty aren't really consulted too much when the university becomes involved in MOOCs. And you can see why. It sounds as a little disrespectful, at the very least. It's just something I think we should be aware of. edX, MIT, Harvard, Berkeley, nonprofit. That's one nonprofit. Coursera, I mentioned. Udacity, for-profit. And Udemy, which didn't come through very well. Okay, so that, and then another thing that is not really education per se, but is invading education that I think we need to be aware of is the do-it-yourself movement that has made Etsy possible. We are a nation of tinkerers, of inventors, and we like to do things. Well, if you have an idea as an educator, you may be able to create something out of it, whether it's an app or a game or something along those lines that will help people learn. There's an organization, South by Southwest, that meets every year in Austin. They meet this coming March. They have a lot of design-focused presentations, but they also have an education strand for 3 days. I've never been, but I'd love to go. It just sounds kind of like we need to know about it, I think. So when I go to publishers' seminars, what I hear them say is, we're really getting into education, we're really spending money, and I'm reading this elsewhere, that education is seen as a market, a place where people can make money, which hasn't been the case that I recall in my lifetime that much. So, I don't know. I do think I'm curious as an educator, about content curation. That might be something that we can contribute that others maybe can't. And I'm going to tell you what crowdfunding is in case you decide you want to be an edupreneur yourself. Do you have an idea?
Well, I was just going to say that a student may be aware that our publishers, in a way, are curators, and we're the crowdsource.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's a good way to look at it.
I know 50 different videos to teach 5 different subjects, and if the publisher has those in a repository, that's great. But I've been approached from publishers asking, what are your 5 favorite videos for this topic? And they wind up on their site, and why would I charge for that? But they ask, hundreds of people, they might say, you can win a $50 Amazon gift card. Well, what do I care? You just share that. And it does, it creates a repository that's better for everybody. And it's already on YouTube anyway, it's just, I don't have to fish for it. And I actually gamify it and I pay my students to fish for it for me.
How do you pay them?
Points.
Yeah.
So I have to decide if an examination that I've created is a better way to assess their knowledge. In your field it might be, but in my field, maybe them finding 20 different anecdotes that explain that to me, and they explain how it explains it, is better than them answering 50 multiple choice questions.
Mm-hmm.
So they make it more exciting for them. They can do either, right? Or they can be half good at this and half good at that.
And gamification is one of the other big avenues that, the Department of Education thinks we need to see more of, and certainly people, for-profit institutions do as well. And the way that the government is supporting that is through entities like Startup America. This is a kind of crowdfunding. Kickstarter is a for-profit one where people put their ideas out there, and you and I can contribute $5, $200, whatever we want, but we don't expect anything from it. We're just happy that somebody's got this great idea and we think it's cool. We want to be a part of it. And now they've got $10,000 to take a product to market. Or sometimes they want $100,000 and they get $1 million just because of the interest that is involved. Now, where do I find out all of this stuff? Mostly through EdSurge. Do you see the handouts that say what Vivian reads on it anywhere? Or do I still have it? I have it. I subscribe to this newsletter from EdSurge. And they have 2. One is for the sort of entrepreneurial aspects of education. This one is called EdSurge Instruct, and it really gives us a lot of info about the kinds of applications and companies that are using some of these ideas and bringing them to market and using them with students. And then I mentioned Wired magazine, which has been making its way around. In particular, in April, there was a very good article, lots of comments on flipping the classroom requires more than video. So I'll just pass those around so you can be aware of them as well. So this is beyond people like the Gates Foundation and, you know, those kinds of entities. This is crowdsourced money, essentially. Do I have the courage to do that? Well, I don't have the idea yet, but once I get the idea, I might have the courage. So if you have an idea, let's get together. Let me see if I've got something else here.
Is there accountability in crowdsourcing? Like, a grant is pretty explicit.
Yeah, yeah.
So
you have to come back and do something with it. That's right.
if you have 1 million donors, how do you?
Well, if they understand that there's no,
They're happily giving.
exactly, they're not motivated by the profit
Right.
motive. They're not investors in the traditional sense of the word. They don't have equity, essentially. They don't have an ownership of the idea. But there is a way to make sure that people have feel a sense of accomplishment when they have completed a course. So here's your badge today. You can take this home knowing that you have completed listening to Vivian Jones for 40 minutes.
Livingston.
This is like the Cub Scouts.
Yeah,
For everything.
that's right. So badges, I joined a thing called Lose It, obviously what that means. Anyway, congratulations, Vivian, you've earned a welcome aboard badge. Well, eventually I'll earn enough badges that I'll get to do something, I don't know what. But if I meet some goals, and you can see how that translates into education. If you meet a goal, then you're awarded a badge. The problem with all this is, do we count that as certification? That's a real tricky line.
I think you just changed the way I teach online, because I congratulate them via email, but I think it would be great if something popped up when they were done.
Mm-hmm.
I never even would have considered, congratulations, you've now unlocked the following special feature, which is the next test. Because that's what their games do now, right? It's not
Right.
enough to win, they have to unlock special stars that, yeah.
Yeah, that could be a way you could structure your online pieces, pieces of the course. Yep, recognizing progress through a goal. And finally, this is not on the handout, but it just summarizes something I really want you to walk away with, and that is I really value my use of the application Pulse. It's an application that allows you to read many different sources in one place. I think it was Steve Jobs who talked about it, and suddenly it took off. But just by having this, I'm able to read all of these sources. I browse through the headlines, go, oh, okay, this looks interesting, and I'll read something. It also affords me news, travel, other kinds of categories, but these are the ones that relate to technology. Now, what other things do I use? I record my ideas in a journal called Day One, and I talk into Speak Voice, or rather Quick Voice, because it's the easiest one for me, and I like the way that it shows up. I can change my titles and then go back and think about what I said to myself in the car. So I'll just click record when I'm driving around and put that down. My plans for the future are to get more into these areas. Okay, so that's all I have today, but I welcome any additional questions. Can y'all tell I was nervous? Yes, Joe.
thank you for presenting this. You got me thinking about all kinds of crazy stuff.
Oh, I'm
but-
disruptive? Anyway.
But I got a question, and this is for you, it's for the group. You read a lot about and hear a lot about the decline in education, okay, in the United States. And I tend to agree with that premise. I don't know if everybody in the room does, but I tend to agree with that premise that however you define education is going downhill. And I wonder why it is. And what you're saying today kind of, I don't know, I thought of a couple of things. And I wonder if one of the reasons we're going downhill in education is because today education is different in that there's so much, the more you learn and know, the more you don't know. And that maybe we've learned so fast that what you don't know increases exponentially as far as what you do know. And that we've gotten to a point now where we learn so quickly that we can't keep up with what we need to know unless you get extremely specialized. I think that's an issue, number one. Number two, particularly when I see this deal where they're going to educate, quote unquote, educate 160,000 people online at one time. I think that's BS, and you may not agree with me, but I think if that crosses the line between defining education as a learning opportunity versus a hurdle that has to be reached to obtain some kind of goal. And most of the people that are in my classrooms are not there to learn. They're there to check something off the list so they can go on and do something else. And as long as that's a prevailing attitude in education, I don't care what any of this stuff does. Fundamentally, we've lost connection with learning. Now, I'm not saying that very bright people will learn, but they'll learn if you throw them in a closet with a flashlight. They'll learn because they're very bright and they're motivated to learn. But if you get below that level, I worry about some of this stuff, and I particularly worry some of the things I see up there, turning education into a game, educating 160,000 people at a time.
I understand your concerns.
And you know, it feels like I'm just going to fall over a cliff as far as education is concerned. It's kind of like that, you know, throwing Granny over the cliff. You know, the Republicans throwing Granny. I feel like education's being wheeled over the cliff here.
They're going to kill my daughter. Yes.
Or whatever. So anyway, that's just I just wanted to express that.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you did. One of the first things that I want to mention is only 10% of the students who enrolled out of the 160,000 completed the course. Okay. And since then, I've enrolled in 2 MOOCs and have not even started either one. So maybe that's a hurdle in itself, just knowing how massive it is to start with. But I think that point about the centrality of the student actually doing some work is the thing we can't lose sight of. Now, what that work might look like, I think, is open to games and other things. Motivation is the nut that hasn't been cracked, you know? If there's a flipped classroom and the student doesn't go home and watch the video, or doesn't go home and read the assignment, or whatever the case may be, then we haven't improved anything, you know? Right. So what teachers not in post-secondary so much as in the K through 12 environment are doing is that they're giving the students, they've got organized chaos where they're giving the students time on the computer to do the video, to do the game or whatever, and then they come to the group activity that they do together. So they kind of rotate through that, and the teacher gets to touch individual students more times. So I think that people are thinking about the same things you're thinking about.
Well, let me ask you this. Does everybody in the room agree that education is in decline in the
I
United
can
States
vouch
of
for
America?
that because I went to an orientation meeting today and they said 84% of the students who enrolled in our college over the summer, 84 of them had to be in a HumD class, meaning they were in at least 2 remedial classes.
Okay.
So they're not even up to par on where they should be after they're graduating.
So this is the question I have. When I was in school, you know, a long, long time ago, we didn't have all this stuff, okay? And education was better than that, okay? So, do we really need all this stuff? Or do we need to go back to the good old days? And the reason I ask this question is my wife's an elementary teacher, okay? And she's taught for many, many, many years. And she's gone through the new math. And she's gone through all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the way that students learn the best is the good old days where you memorize your multiplication tables and you solve problems in the old-fashioned classroom. Still seems to work the best. So is all this an experimental pathway to suddenly discover someday that the way we did it 40 years ago is still the best way to educate people? I don't know the answer.
First of
to
all,
that.
I don't know that I accept the premise that it was better then.
Well, was education better then?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I accept that premise.
When did it peak? The follow-up question is, when did it peak?
Well, I think there's so many elements to it. I mean, I grew up in a socioeconomic area that had a lot of resources, and children had a lot of support at home and all that sort of thing. Now, my brother, who grew up in the same environment, didn't take college prep classes. So his education was very different from mine.
So I have 3 or 4 points in random order that may or may not support stuff that John talked about. So first, I'm a computer nerd, right? So I'm a technology person. I love technology, but I think that we overuse it, definitely. I think that by throwing it in front of 5-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 20-year-olds, we're creating that generation of people that are ADD. We're helping them be ADD by giving them the technology, because when you have to, if you say, well, just tweet the assignment or tweet the message and stuff, well, then they read it in a matter of seconds and it's over with, right? We're not actually making them pay attention, right? So we're letting them be ADD, and we're enforcing being ADD, I think, a lot of times when we're using certain technology. Now, that's one. Now, if I go backwards to the 70s and the 80s, prior to using all the computers and all that kind of stuff, and LinkedIn and everything else that there would be, students were very different. But of course, what we did was the people who went to the universities could either afford it, right, or they were really motivated. We didn't have necessarily unmotivated people going as much to the universities. And you had, because right now in the United States, right, we have more females in college than we do males. But if we went back to the 70s, was that still true? We had more males than we had females, right? So things have changed. We also have more displaced homemakers, whatever else, going back to college. We have all these people having to come back to college. So I think the makeup of our students different. Back then, we had really one type of student, in a way, I look at it, and one method of teaching them. What we're trying to do now is we're taking a huge variety of students, and we're saying, here's the one way to teach them. And we're changing it. So, because you got Princeton, you got MIT saying, we put all our courses online, right? And so you read in all the magazines and stuff, it says, hey, look, they're going all online. We should do the same thing. No, our student isn't the same as the average Princeton student.
Yeah.
So why would we follow what Princeton does? No.
Yeah, two quick comments along those lines. The first thing, I think the mistake we're making is that we're increasing the distance between the student and the teacher. And I don't see a lot of evidence that students learn well as the distance between the student and the teacher increases. In fact, I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the other is true. I'm a chemist, all right? And at one point I was off track in high school, and I decided, I'll just learn this chemistry class that I need on my own during the summertime so that I can take AP chemistry. Highly motivated student with a lot of background. I couldn't teach myself chemistry out of a textbook. I don't think you can teach yourself chemistry online either. All right? You can throw all that material out there and the students are still not going to get it because the distance between them and their teacher is too far. That's the first thing. The second thing is on the flipped classroom. There are interesting ideas there. But if you had to choose between, in my discipline, between a student getting the lecture and not practicing enough versus practicing a lot without having had any lecture, I think it's pretty clear what's not going to work. If you throw them in front of a bunch of questions, come in class and we're all going to work in groups on these questions, and only 20% of the students have done any of the background reading. So, those 20% of the students are kind of doing it and everybody else is copying it down as they go along.
Well, don't you think you could create some kind of a check that they have listened to the lecture?
How do you motivate your students?
I try.
the motivation, I can't say that we can motivate people, but,
Well, I mean, but you're using points to motivate
Yeah,
for
it's
certain
points,
things.
I say I pay them, but, to me, again, flipped classrooms, when I looked into it a couple of years ago, I just wikied it took 5 minutes, I tweeted it basically. It's homework. I don't entirely grasp the idea. Great, it's homework where they watch me lecture instead of watching me lecture, but it's just homework. So what do? I assign the homework, I grade the homework. Did you do the homework? Okay. Our students are better when they read before coming to class. Do they read before coming to class? No. How do you motivate them to do it? You give them a quiz before they come into class.
Right.
If they didn't do the reading, then they didn't do it. It's a lot of bookkeeping and a lot of hand-holding, but I think that's what they're paying us for. They're paying us for content and expertise, but they're paying us to guide them along the garden path to knowledge.
Larry, one thing that I do need to say is, theoretically, I don't know if this works in practice, but the people who feel they've been successful with flipped classrooms say they get to spend more time with students
Right.
by using it.
That's great to me for a junior or senior or graduate level course, but I just feel like my courses are vocabulary rich. I'd love to be higher up on Bloom's taxonomy, but that's just not going to happen until the last weeks of class. They need the basic information before I can set them free. And if I do that without that, they're going to come back. I've had students come, I'm like, what is this? I set them free, come back, be creative. Like, that's not psychology, that's a train wreck. Without the exemplars, what can they do?
I think in the sciences too, we have this other issue where it's dangerous if they don't know what they're doing. So if we flip it, they don't know what they're doing, we can have huge problems with safety issues. So I think that's one of our concerns in the sciences. As much as we'd like to do it, they need to know what chemicals are put together and what chemicals not to add together and how to use equipment.
It's an asset, big deal.
Yeah, you can mail away for rocks, but you don't want to mail, which is expensive because they're heavy, right? And rare, some of them. But yeah, you want to mail away for chemicals and.
And I think a lot of that has to do with hands-on experience. You can't get that hands-on experience if you're just watching a video the whole time.
And that's a common
And it's
complaint.
static.
No, that's just part of the flipped classroom.
Yeah.
Basically, what it is whatever you think the student can do to prepare for the classroom, outside of class, any work in whatever your discipline is, if there's anything that they can do outside
Right.
to prepare them for the hands-on in the classroom, that's what it is. So, if it's dangerous, then don't put that into the flip, the flip side. What, is there anything at all
But
that can
again,
be done?
I videotape every single one of my intro to computer classes, every single one.
Right.
And I even convert all the files so the students can put them on an iPad.
Right.
So you can do that as huge file to these small files. I've had 2 students who've actually come to me and said, I'd like a copy of some of those files. Out of 60, or something, 2 have come.
See, that's the thing, it's the motivation,
The motivation,
to
yeah.
do that
So
work
you
before
can-
they come to class.
You
That's
can
what
come, if you just come to my
yeah.
office, you can get all the videos, you can watch them, you can see the lecture over again, or if you miss that day, you can then watch the lecture. I've had 2 students. I mean, I don't know how much more convenient I can make it, other than burn it to a flash drive and hand it to
Now,
them.
what about the reward system, the points? I mean, can you use that, like, makes it, can you do,
Well, but is
because
it a reward or is it a?
We do it though, it's called a grade.
That's what
Right,
my point.
right, yes,
I just-
yeah.
So that's
Does it
what
not
I
work?
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, they hand out little treats as they go along, and not in the K through 12 system. I taught the K through 12 system, and I tried it, and it crashed and burned there as well when I did it. So it did
The
here.
grade, no, you're right,
But the grade is the ultimate goal as far as I'm concerned.
Points for having.
And
work, that's-
I like all the stuff I hear, but at the same time, I dislike it. I'm thinking of the job, and over here, it's a really good idea, but over here's my concerns. I'll give you an example of the crowdfunding. My wife and I had a bunch of trees cut down,
Yeah.
and they took them to the recycling place where we buy our mulch. So I had to pay to get my trees cut down, I had to pay to buy it back as mulch. And for crowdfunding, if I send money in to buy a product at the end, I've done the same thing. So that concerns me. So I'm paying twice for the product and making someone else rich.
Well, just to point out, another concern on crowdsourcing is, like when you've got something like Amazon's Turk, whatever that's called, where they bid essentially and they ask people to do jobs. The average pay is like $2.30 an hour. So essentially, by having systems like that, we're reinforcing the exploitation of workers for low pay. So, I mean, yes, there are some very, very serious concerns, but as experts, it's our job to figure out, what can we use?
Right.
Is there something that we can use. At the very least, we need to know what they're talking about so that we can answer those concerns in the community.
I don't think about y'all that much on how this would apply, but with psychology, I can use psychology to teach psychology, and so I basically view them as my employees now. They get paid nothing, they pay me, right? They don't understand that very much, and their goal is to learn psychology vicariously by teaching me how to teach psychology. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I'm
So
going to have to think about it a while.
I become a better professor every semester because I, in treat, require 30 students at a pop to find ways to make me a better teacher for them. And so I'm relevant-er every semester by bastardizing grammar as part of it, like they do, right? And so make me the best computer teacher I could possibly be, etc. So that's, I guess I crowdsource, and I pay them for it, paltry amounts, 5 points out of 2,000. So some people are like, how could you pay them for doing this? Because it's nothing, and they love it. Like they want it so badly because it's 5 points when it just, percentage-wise, there's still meat in the cheese, but they find me the best cheese that I can find.
I think part of the problem here is a paradigm shift that we're in the midst of.
Yeah.
And there's an old distinction between training and educating. And we tend to see the world through the paradigm of the educator, whereas all these techniques have traditionally been put down as training. And there's a, in a sense, the professor is being reduced to the corporate trainer, not just by using these techniques, but the emphasis on speed, on doing things essentially for the job. All of this is all politically, I think, a strategy to diminish the importance of the teacher, to make these courses, in a sense, teacher-proof by standardizing and sending them out this way. And I think it's politically part of the paradigm shift. Now, whether you see it as dangerous or not, candle makers saw electricity as dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It depends where you stand on this. But I think from the point of view of being deep inside the educational rather than the training perspective or the paradigm, I see a lot of this stuff as gives me great pause. Put it that way.
You're a doctor, I view myself as a common source of information. I'm not an expert, I'm a generalist. So I guess I don't think I'm a huckster, but I'm just sharing with them the exciting ways, like Stelter said last week, Kerry Shook doesn't believe everything he preaches, but he preaches in a way that excites people so they want to continue to learn what he has to say that's more substantive. And I guess...
Well, you see, that's the return to sophism.
Right.
We started out with the sophists.
Right.
Plato tried to correct it.
Right.
And now the internet has taken us back.
I think so.
Well, whether you see that as a good thing or not is another fact.
So you're saying that education is cyclical, that's what you're saying now?
But this is a very interesting cycle, returning to what the sophists stood for, which was whatever generates power, whatever gets you what you want, rather than what Plato liked to argue anyway, was the pursuit of truth and the ideal, which I'm not saying is not political in some way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys.
Well, thank you so much. Let Vivian know.